Morning, Jane.
Morning.
Morning. Thank you very much for making time this morning. Let's get straight into it, if that's okay with you.
Of course, yes, I'm delighted to be here.
Great. So my first question is, could you tell me a little bit more about Evenbreak, why you set the organisation up and what it is you do?
Yeah, for sure. So Evenbreak really was set up to address some problems that I could see in the world of recruitment and employment and disability particularly. And I'd been in the field of diversity and inclusion for a very long time. But when I spoke to employers about disability particularly, I'd get one of two reactions. The first one would be kind of, why would I want to employ a disabled person? I mean, they didn't use those exact words, but you knew what they meant. The other one, a bit more positively, was we recognise that this is a pool of talent that we're not tapping into, but we don't know how to, and disabled people don't apply. So I spoke to disabled people and said, why aren't you applying for the second lot of employers? Because they want your talent. And they said, because we don't know which is which. Every employer says we are an equal opportunities employer or we are an inclusive employer. But actually our lived experience is that that's not always the case when it comes to disability. And so why would you bother knocking your head against that same brick wall all the time? And I can remember thinking, that's awful. Someone should do something about that. And then, quirky twist of fate, in my early 40s, I became one of those disabled people. I'm one of the 83% of disabled people who became disabled as an adult.
Yeah.
So I have a spinal condition. I'd had spinal surgery, which had left me pretty much lying horizontal in bed with a laptop suspended above me. And nobody had done anything about this problem. So we came up with the idea of having a job board that was just for disabled people and just for those employers who were enlightened enough to see us as a pool of talent. And so that was back in 2011, and that was the start of Evenbreak. And that was kind of as a result of recognising these problems that weren't being addressed. And interestingly, it worked very well. Employers were coming to us and saying, this is great, we're getting these, disabled candidates we didn't get before. But we're not sure that our recruitment process is really as barrier-free as it should be. We have hiring managers who are very nervous around disability, worried about saying the wrong thing or offending someone or not knowing how to support appropriately. So in order to address that problem, we started offering training and consultancy to employers to help them become more inclusive and accessible. And then to complete the journey, candidates were saying to us, can you help us with our CVs? Can you help us with interview prep? And we really weren't geared up to do that. So we'd signpost them elsewhere. And then they'd come back and say, well, actually, those sort of mainstream career support services aren't accessible. They don't take into account the additional barriers that disabled people face. So to address that problem, we started a career hive, which is career support services for disabled people. So in those 13 years, we've grown from, a small UK-only job board to offering a whole kind of set of services for employers and candidates. And we're now the only global job board that specialises in disability that's run by and for disabled people. Everybody at Evenbreak has a disability.
Incredible story and a journey as well. So over that 13-year period, you've obviously seen quite a lot of change, positive change, hopefully. But how do you feel about the importance that organisations are currently putting on disability inclusion in their hiring strategies?
Yeah, I think certainly for most of those 13 years, if you talked to employers about diversity, they were beginning to become interested in that, whereas say 20 years ago, they'd have said, that's got nothing to do with me, we're a business. They do realise now that actually we need a diversity of talent within the workplace, but a lot of the diversity inclusion emphasis was on race and gender and maybe LGBTQIA+, very little on disability. I think partly because it just doesn't feel very sexy. And also because it feels more complicated. It's so diverse. Disability can cover mental health conditions, it can cover wheelchair users, it can cover autism. It's very, very broad and feels complicated. I think in the last few years that's changed. I think that employers, recruiters are now realising that actually disabled people do bring an awful lot of value with them, and we need to maybe change some of our processes to become more accessible to disabled candidates, which actually in turn makes them more accessible to all of other candidates as well. It just makes it a better process. So I think we're getting there, but very slowly.
And my sense is that, from what I can see, that there is a shift, a positive shift, and organisations are starting to prioritise in amongst everything else. What do you hope to see, I guess, in the next 2 years? If you look forward, what would be your dream in terms of what change and the kind of commitments you'd like to see from organisations around disability inclusion?
Yeah, I mean, our mission at Evenbreak, and we've now grown obviously to a much larger size, is to create a world where we no longer need to exist. So our long-term vision is that disabled people will be seen as very valid parts of the talent pool. And so recruitment processes, employers will actually remove all of those barriers so that disabled people have exactly the same opportunities to enter and thrive and progress in the workplace as anyone else. That's not going to happen in 2 years.
No.
But I think within 2 years, what I'd really love to see is for all organisations to kind of change their views around how they see disability. And I think even now it's still seen as a problem to solve, rather than a huge opportunity. I mean, disabled people, we're all very different. We're all very diverse, obviously. But the one thing that we all have in common is that we face barriers every day that other people don't. That might be inaccessible tech, inaccessible processes, inaccessible transport or buildings. And what that means is that we have to develop skills that can help us navigate around those barriers. So that might be resilience, it might be problem solving, it might be creative thinking. And of course, we bring all of those skills with us to the workplace. So actually, we are premium candidates. We are not a pity hire. We are a very sensible hire. And what I'd love to see within the next 1 or 2 years is for recruiters and employers to look at that talent pool through that lens. You know, this is a great opportunity to bring skills in that we otherwise might not have, that we weren't aware that was out there. And so that removing the barriers becomes a really cool business decision, rather than we've got to do this because the law says so, or it's the right thing to do. But actually seeing this as a really crucial business decision, so it becomes part of the way we think about recruitment. How do we remove any barriers that might prevent talented people from accessing the adverts, going through the application process, being assessed, and obviously job offer and onboarding?
And from a kind of weird perspective, did COVID help in terms of creating more opportunities for disabled candidates from a physical perspective that need not to go into the office to do a job? Did it help? Or
it definitely did. I mean, obviously from a health perspective it was disastrous, and we know that disabled people were much more impacted than non-disabled people in terms of deaths and catching the disease and whatever. But actually, yes, you're right, in terms of actually employers understanding that people can work remotely effectively. So disabled people have been asking employers for decades, can I do this job from home? And the answer was almost always, absolutely not possible, couldn't be done, wouldn't work. And then all of a sudden there's a pandemic and everybody's having to work from home pretty much. And it wasn't a disaster. People were able to work from home. In fact, if anything, more effectively, because there were fewer distractions. You didn't have the tiring commute to get in and out. So I think it did help, because it made employers realise that there are a number of different ways that will work equally well, if not better. So the only model isn't 40 hours a week, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, commuting in, commuting back. But part-time work works. People who work at different times of the day work, as well as actually being able to work remotely. And it did open up, and most organisations now, for those roles that can, will offer hybrid work at least. Some, unfortunately, are beginning to say, no, we want you back in the office now. But those who are more enlightened and recognise that that might cut down their talent pipeline are recognising that there are different ways of working, and we can encompass that, and it's not as difficult as we thought it would be. So definitely it's opened the doors for a lot of not just disabled people, but people who might be carers, people who are part-time, parents who have to get back and pick the kids up from school and haven't got to commute back to do that. So it did open up, I think, the workplace for a lot of people that weren't really included previously.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. You have a global perspective on what you do. I know you work sort of across different countries. Do you think there is a country that's leading the pack at the moment in terms of its focus on disability inclusion?
Well, it's difficult to pinpoint a specific country. One of the things that absolutely flabbergasted me as I started doing work more in other countries, visiting other countries, seeing what they were doing around disability inclusion, is that actually the UK is further ahead on this journey than many other countries. And considering I'd spent so long, railing against the slow pace of change within the UK, I found that quite shocking. Different countries are doing different things. The disability employment gap is different in different countries. Some of the countries I thought would be further ahead than us don't appear to be. And then there are different perspectives. So America, for example, have a slightly different angle on disability inclusion to the UK. And I think one of the things that taught me was that we should be working globally so that we can all pool the good things that we're doing and all rise together. So if there are countries that are really looking at this for the first time, haven't really thought about it before, we can kind of accelerate that journey because they haven't got to go through the whole trial and error bit that we did. And we can help them to accelerate that journey. We've discovered that this works. We've discovered that this works. But also we can learn from other countries in terms of, oh, that's what you do. Let's have a look at that and how does that work? So for me, a global perspective means that all countries will improve, maybe at a faster rate of knots than we currently are.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. My final question, you are a founding member of the AMS D&I Alliance, and we're very proud to have you in that. What do you see as the opportunity for Evenbreak to be part of that alliance?
Yeah, we're thrilled to be part of that alliance. So I think it's, kudos to AMS really to recognise the need for bringing in that lived experience, and along with all the other alliance partners, being able to bring that lived experience, being able to support you as an organisation, but also your clients in terms of disability inclusion, how you can attract and retain more talented disabled candidates. I think that's a great opportunity for AMS, but it's a great opportunity for Evenbreak to have access to that market. So for me, it's kind of a marriage made in heaven.
I love that. Jane, thank you so much. Thank you for your time this morning. We are delighted to be partnering with you around disability inclusion. We're excited to kind of see the change going forward. There's obviously so much to be done, but we're excited to be partnering with you on that particular activity.
Thank you. Very exciting times, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thanks very much.